Welcome to Divorce Mortgage Strategies, brought to you by the Divorce Lending Association, where clarity meets strategy in the financial side of divorce. Whether you're a family law professional, a financial expert, or someone navigating the complexities of divorce yourself, this podcast is your go-to resource for trusted insight into how real property and mortgage financing intersect with divorce outcomes. We don't just talk about houses. We talk about strategic solutions that protect futures. Let's dive in. Today, we welcome host, certified divorce lending professional Cindy Scobee and her guests, title experts Susan Schmitt and Reid Vance.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Scobee. I am a certified divorce lending professional and a contributing host of the Divorce Lending Association podcast. And today I am interviewing Susan Schmitt, the president, and Reid Vance, who is an advisory title officer with Ticor Title in the greater Seattle area. I am so honored that you both are here. And I just want to briefly say that, Susan, I met you because you did a presentation on estate planning and divorce. And I was someone who was listening, and I thought, I have got to talk to her. So that's how we kind of met up, and you were gracious enough to say yes to this and also to bring Reid on. So just my starting question for you both is, to begin, I just would like if you could share for a moment a little bit about yourself and a little bit about, what you do, Ticor, your practice, etc.
Well, I'll start. I am Susan Schmitt. I'm the president now of Ticor Title. Most of my career was spent on the escrow side of things. So I've actually been in the escrow world since mid-'80s, so quite a long time. I think it's safe to say Reid and I are both lifers in the field. So I have had a lot of experience. I've closed for many years. So we've had a lot of experience with the topic we're going to be talking about today, which is divorce and how it affects us in the title insurance world, how it affects buyers, and I became the president of Ticor, just over a year now. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And my name is Reid Vance. I actually started in this business back in the 80s, early 80s, I'm really dating myself, but in the Columbia Tower when it first opened up. There was a company moved in there called Chicago Title.
Oh, yeah.
14th floor. And it was my first day ever in title. I was previously waiting tables in Pioneer Square and finishing up college studies and waiting tables. And a friend said, "Oh, here's a really good gig. It's in the same neighborhood. You could work in the Columbia Tower. Your pay will be more stable. You'll get benefits. Hopefully you'll never make less money."
Right.
So it was kind of my first real 9-to-5 white collar job. And I ended up examining for about 18 years, residential and commercial property, which is really interesting, but I really kind of missed the interaction with people. And so I was glad to kind of move into the title unit. And then I've been now a title officer for about the last 20 years.
Wow. How long have you both worked together?
On and off, I guess, a little bit. But she's always, she's been on the other side of it, but a long time.
A long time. Gosh, I'm going to say 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you guys collectively 40 years. You know your stuff.
Yes.
So I would love to start with the question that I get all the time. And I'm going to preface this by saying that a lot of attorneys do this to protect their clients. And it's where they will go ahead and have clients stay on the mortgage, yet one of them will be asked to quit claim off of title before they come off the mortgage. The reason for this that I hear a lot is to protect their client. So I really wanted to talk about this. So again, if one spouse is removed from title before the mortgage is, whether it's refinanced or assumed, what risks or limitations should we be aware of? And anything else you want to speak to on this?
Well, I think, the first thing, my comment would just be that that's great, whether they stay there or they move to Florida. They no longer have an ownership interest. However, as you know, there's still a loan guarantor. So it's a little bit problematic. It's like all of a sudden, well, you don't have any equity, you don't have a home, you've given everything to your ex, all the ownership interest, but you still have this liability. Any comments from you, Susan? Or...
Yeah, I mean, from a title insurance standpoint, I would say it doesn't affect what we do. However, like as Reid said, what you're doing is when you're conveying your interest in the real estate, but you're staying on the loan as a guarantor, which is what you become, then, if your spouse stops making payments, you're going to go through that foreclosure process as well. Yet you have no ownership interest in the property. So even if you were to make those payments up, it's like, how are you going to, you don't have any way to get the property back.
And if the deed of trust is then, obviously, if it's paid and you have a full reconveyance, releasing it, that solves the problem. But quite often, we do see this scenario where, oh, yeah, she has a new boyfriend. She moved to Florida. She doesn't want to have anything to do with me or the house. But guess what? She's still entangled with it.
Yeah.
Right. So do you see this often? Do you see where you come upon, and I think we've, kind of, that's one of the topics we've talked about is the whole having to find the person to sign the quitclaim deed. So if we have a situation where, let's say, they didn't acknowledge the deed at the time of divorce, but we had basically the attorney had drafted the quitclaim deed, right? So maybe you could speak a little bit to that, because that's always the challenge, right? Is finding that person.
Well, let's talk about, I'm going to tweak your topic just a bit. So what is most common is that when the settlement agreement is written up by the divorce attorney, they will state something like, if Reid and I are married and we're getting a divorce, then the property is awarded to Reid. Susan must sign a quitclaim deed. But the problem is, once that's filed and once that's finalized, we as a title insurance company, when we're insuring, we are legally required to follow the terms of that settlement as it relates to the property that we're closing on. So when it says there must be a quitclaim deed, but the attorney didn't follow through and have the quitclaim deed done at the time the divorce was final, that's when it becomes a problem. Because if we're insuring 5 years down the road, people get divorced for a reason. Rarely do they like each other better 5 years after the divorce. And so now we're saying, I'm sorry, Reid, but you're going to have to find Susan because we need to do a quitclaim deed, or vice versa. Susan, you've got to find Reid because the divorce settlement says he needs to sign a quitclaim deed, and that hasn't happened. So that becomes very problematic. And the client who obtained the property in the divorce settlement is very agitated with us because we have to say, look, we've got to find your spouse. They've got to sign this quitclaim deed.
And it seems like often we're kind of perceived as the bad guys. Like, oh, you guys are just being sticklers. You're being way too technical. And they'll point out the paragraph where I was clearly awarded the home. It's right here in the decree.
Right.
But a lot of times there's even stronger language. It says any conveyance will be effectuated by a quitclaim deed.
Right.
Any change of ownership. It's very clear. So a lot of times I like it when this language isn't there, truthfully, because it's clearly there's an award there. There's no requirement for a quitclaim deed. It keeps it simple.
Yes.
But let's elaborate on that, because that's huge.
Yeah, it is huge.
Yeah. So let's say what you, as a, in your roles, what would you want the divorce decree to say?
Whatever the parties want. Really,
well, no,
it
means
yeah, no, I get it.
It's going to convey.
Well, I don't care if it says that, as long as they're fully aware that then we're going to expect a quitclaim deed to be.
I do care what it says, so let me elaborate just a little bit. It's like, remember, when the judge signs off the order, and if that order says the family home at 123 Happy Street is awarded to Susan Schmitt, the respondent, right? Or the petitioner, whoever I am, right? No quitclaim deed is further required to grant me that property. When the judge signs off on that order, boom, it's done. We don't need a quitclaim deed. It's only when the attorney adds that language that it becomes a requirement. So as long as they're specific in the order and they, clearly define the property that is to be conveyed to one spouse or the other, That's all that's needed.
Yeah, and I
think
think what
that's
I
neat.
meant, not to dismiss what you said, Susan,
Yeah.
but of course I care. It's just like
Yeah.
I'm processing all this information. I'm reading through the decree. I want to make a decision within 7 minutes, and I'm looking for the legal description. I'm looking for the property address and the tax number. I'm looking at all the language, and I don't see any language about a quitclaim deed being needed. A lot of times I'll read it again just to make sure. So
Yeah,
it
because
is
it's
something
rare
we're
that you
really,
don't see it.
yeah, because it's something
Yeah.
that's so important.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'd be better if they didn't put that in there, then you don't have to do the chase.
Right, I'll read it. I said I read it twice. There's no requirement for a quitclaim deed. The home was clearly awarded to Jacob.
And then when we create the commitment, we're not going to show the property in Reid and Susan anymore. If I've been awarded the property through the decree, it vests solely in my name as my separate estate.
You bet.
Okay. So I have another question. With a pending dissolution, how does closing and ensuring a sale transaction differ than with a refinance transaction?
It's so much simpler. And one of the main reasons is 99% of the time, the sellers are using a statutory warranty deed. And they're both signing it.
Okay.
So by the nature of a statutory warranty deed, it includes covenants against encumbrances, liens, anything. And also the sellers have the right to sell. They're both signing a statutory warranty deed, and which just means if there's any issue, a buyer could sue them because they used a statutory warranty deed. Yeah. All those covenants that are basically put in there per statute, it's going to cover mortgages, liens, any kind of.
Cindy, are you talking about pertaining to the divorce specifically, correct?
Yeah.
So
if it's still pending and they both sign the warranty deed,
yes,
we're fine.
So really, it's like in Washington State, you're either married or you're single. So even if you're in the middle of a divorce, you are still married.
Yeah, you're still
until
married.
That divorce is finalized. So in that instance, it takes still both parties to sign the statutory warranty deed, conveying title from the sellers who are divorcing to that buyer who's ever purchasing the property. So it's actually, if you ask me, I will tell you that it's easier to work on a sale property when someone is in the middle of a divorce than sometimes after the divorce has been final because of the things that are written up in the order. So when someone is divorcing, the biggest issue we run into on the escrow side. So remember, from a title insurance standpoint, we're actually providing a policy of insurance. And so from Reid's standpoint, he's got to make sure that anyone that has an interest in the property joins in the execution of that deed to the buyer. From my standpoint on the escrow side, I'm always concerned about who should get money, who is getting money, who's not getting money that should. So the only thing on a sale file when someone is in the middle of a divorce is who is going to hold the money. Oftentimes sellers can't agree because the divorce isn't final. What is the split? I should get paid for this, right? Well, that we've actually had a lot of success when we can talk with the sellers on the phone and let them know that, hey, if you can't agree, let's deposit proceeds with one attorney or the other. So it can be the respondent's attorney or the petitioner's attorney. Oftentimes sellers think, well, no, I don't want the attorney to start spending those funds. The attorney can't do that. The attorneys know that. So once we explain that to the seller, they're fine. Usually they'll agree that one or the other's attorney is going to go ahead and hold those funds until that divorce can be finalized. But what's nice is when the parties are divorcing, if they want to get rid of the asset, it allows them to do that. And what they really want is just the money, so that once the divorce is final, those funds are split and it's done. There's, oftentimes if you go through the divorce and it says the house must be sold, then you run into bigger problems because someone wants to be reimbursed because they've been mowing the lawn for 3 months, or somebody didn't make the payments, or there was repairs that needed to be done. All of this stuff.
The power bill, everything else,
So it can become a lot more complicated for the parties and for us. So remember, when I'm reading that final decree, I'm addressing anything that is related to the property that's being sold. And oftentimes through the order, what you'll see is the Chase Visa card ending in 5743 must be paid. You know, the American Express card, this car must be paid off.
This refinance must happen by June 2027, you know, and then all of a sudden that's a huge problem. Well, maybe they don't want to refi. Interest rates have rocketed to the point where, like, I don't really want to do a refi. Well, it was written right into your decree. You have to.
But those are the things, right? Those are the things that, you know, we're going to tell the parties. It's like, look, we're going to give you a check at closing, or we're going to wire funds to you, and you are still obligated to follow the terms of the decree. That doesn't become our burden simply because we're handling the sale of the property, right? Mm-hmm. And as Reid mentioned, another thing that can get complicated is when it says you will refinance, to remove the spouse's name. Again, if Reid and I are divorcing, I get the house, Reid's still on the promissory note and deed of trust, because the judge truly, even though they have a lot of power, they don't have the power to remove the obligations of the parties that they signed to the lender who provided them the loan.
Right.
The only way that can be done, of course, is the borrower who is continuing in the home needs to be able to qualify on their own, so that the other spouse can be released of liability, or they've got to refinance. And oftentimes, if that remaining spouse can't refinance because they don't qualify, it can create a problem. But again, the only way to resolve that is that, again, you've got to go back to court, and then you've got to get a motion that says you must sell the house. You must do this by this time frame, or the house needs to be sold and the proceeds need to be divided, or whatever the case may be.
And I do see that. I don't see a lot of houses being sold before the divorce is finalized. But what you're saying is it actually is easier on the parties.
It really does happen. And part of it is just how strong that statutory warranty is, because it contains covenants against encumbrances, liens, mortgages caused by the owner, by the seller. So you're covenant to the buyers that, hey, you don't have to worry about anything that I caused. I'm going to cover you.
Are you guys seeing where someone tries to assume their current mortgage loan? If there's anything that comes up with title on that, or any oddities to that, because that's a big piece right now, is clients are like, I don't want to give up my 2.5% interest rate. I don't blame them. So they're trying to assume their current loan, right, as the sole owner to remove the other party. Is there anything from a title perspective that comes up on your side that's a little different when they do that?
No, believe it or not, that's really more of an internal process with the lender. We're rarely involved in something like that. And, you know, the lender may at the end ask us to record something like a release of liability for the spouse who is no longer going to be associated with the mortgage, but that's an internal process, and the lenders deal with that directly with the borrower.
That seems to come up a lot. Another question I have is, when title is held in a trust or transferred into a trust as part of the settlement, what should we be aware of from a title insurance and coverage standpoint?
We deal with trusts all the time. Generally, they're pretty safe, whether they want to do it right after the divorce is final, or, I mean, it'd be rare, kind of strange to convey into a family trust during a divorce.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that.
I mean, it still would be possible, but I could see that being way more complicated, because then you have to know, well, how does the petitioner and respondent both feel about this transfer? Are they in agreement about doing this, you know, transferring to a trust? But, you know, lenders have their own underwriting guidelines, and I know you guys review trusts pretty carefully also.
Yeah, we definitely do.
You look for a lot of the same things we're looking for. So I think where it gets a little bit dicey, if you have some very unusual, convoluted trust agreement, that might cause some red flags, like, this is really unusual, you know. And we don't usually even need the whole trust. We want the first few pages that kind of outline the structure of the trust, who the trustors are, who the trustees are, who the beneficiaries are, the name of the trust, the date, provisions for successor trustees.
But
Yeah.
again, it's going to be unusual, Cindy, that would happen through the divorce.
Yeah.
Rarely is it going to be in the decree that the property must transfer into the trust. Usually the divorce is going to award it to one property or one party or the other.
Yeah.
And once that's done, then the party who has the property will work with their own attorney to get the asset transferred into the trust.
You know, a much more likely scenario would be one party gets the home out of the divorce, they're the sole owner, then a week or month later they deed to their trust.
Yeah.
Right. For
much
sure.
more common.
So I have had clients where I'm just going to say like gambling has come up. So, the reason I bring this up is attachment of liens to a property. So in the middle of a divorce, one party maybe has some sort of, let's just say gambling issue, and the concern of a lien attaching to the property before the divorce is settled. Is that something that, can you speak to that? Am I way off on that? Is that possible?
Yeah, we see liens attached all the time, I would say.
I was to say, we probably see it all the time. We just don't know they're rooted.
Why?
We don't know they're rooted in gambling debts.
Okay.
So that needs to be paid. And oftentimes if it's attached during the divorce, then the attorneys are actually really good about stating that, the $56,000 lien against Reid will come out of his part of the proceeds through closing, something of that nature. So that's pretty easy to resolve. I think what is harder, and another thing that we see that's very common, is that there'll be a judgment derived from the decree. So maybe we say Susan is awarded the property, but Reid is awarded a $50,000 judgment as part of the settlement as his portion of the equity. So what happens is, once that happens, a judgment usually for the most part is only good and has to renew every 10 years. But a judgment derived through a divorce decree is good forever until it's satisfied. So again, going back to our earlier scenario, along with the quitclaim deed, it's like if I owe Reid $50,000 and maybe I paid him that $50,000 3 months after we were divorced, but now fast forward 15 years later and I'm going to sell the property and I'm still subject to that divorce decree. And so now I'm like, okay, Susan, you need to show us proof that you paid Reid this $50,000, right? Because we've got to satisfy the judgment because it could attach to the property. And I have no idea where Reid is. Worse yet, Reid could come back and say, Susan never gave me that money and I want it. And I don't have any proof anymore that I paid him because it was 15 years ago. So these are the things that we have to deal with that really can throw a wrench in things. So again, if there is a judgment awarded through the decree, when that money is paid, again, the attorney should simply file a satisfaction of judgment to protect their client, to protect the client that owes the money. And and they're referencing not a judgment number, but they're referencing the cause number of the divorce. And that clearly tells everyone in the title world, this encumbrance has been paid. Right. So I don't have to worry about it.
Is that pretty common where that's not taken care of at the time when it's been paid, and then you guys?
Sadly, yes.
It's extreme. We never really see it.
I'm always joking, like lenders are very eager to record their mortgage or deed of trust. For some reason, the release always takes a little bit longer.
Right. And it's the same with liens and judgments derived through the decree. Okay. It just doesn't happen. And again, I think it's just because, if your field of expertise is in divorce and family law, doesn't mean it's in real estate. So you have no idea how one affects the other.
Can you, and this is all in that question, which you just answered about liens, which was wonderful, but what about vesting? Can we just touch on vesting when, when there's a divorce? Does vesting change, and what does that mean when a divorce is filed? And maybe it doesn't in Washington State. I know in like Oregon, it's like tenancy by the entirety if you're
Right.
tenants in common. So I'm just curious about vesting here, how people vest, and then when they get divorced or they file for divorce, does something change with vesting here in Washington State?
I'll just jump in because Susan's been generous enough to do so much talking. I appreciate it. You're making my job easy, but generally we're vesting as a married couple or husband and wife, usually married couple now,
Okay.
covering all the bases, and it's community property state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If they are both divorced and they're both, regardless of whether they're living there or not, but if they are divorced, we won't vest them husband and wife. We won't vest them as married couple. We'll vest them as tenants in common.
Okay, but nothing, so if they are a married couple when they buy, and then they filed for divorce, and let's say, so nothing flips, the vesting
Not,
does not change, it will stay as married couple.
Until the divorce is
until the
final.
final decree is filed.
Okay,
Not the separation, not the CR2A agreement, but the final decree.
okay,
The
and
dissolution decree. Decree of dissolution.
And then we'll vest accordingly, according to what the order says.
So for example, if that decree just completely missed talking about the home, just didn't even mention it because they'd worked it out on their own, it didn't even need to be addressed by lawyers. They had a friendly discussion of how they would deal with the proceeds and the home. That's when we would vest as tenants in common, because it's possible nowhere in the separation contract, nowhere in the decree are they even mentioning the real estate. But we're not going to vest them as husband and wife when we know they're
divorced.
So that's when we would vest tenants in common.
and this might be a really silly question, so let's say they have an attorney, and the agreement is we're going to keep basically intertwined in this home for the next 3 years, okay? Does vesting still stay as a married couple?
No.
Not if they're, no, that's when it would be tenants in common. If there was no award made, then because we don't know, they're still owners. They're both still
right.
owners.
So if they're still owners, they're still on the mortgage together, they're still on title, you guys are never going to get anything to say they're now tenants in common.
Well,
so
no, we would just write it on our report.
Okay.
We can do that without a deed.
And that would happen when they finally come to you to, let's say one of them refinances.
Well, if we had a reason to open a real estate transaction.
Yeah.
Okay.
When we prepare the commitment,
the title report.
Yeah, we're going to review the decree and we're going to vest accordingly. So as Reid said, if the decree doesn't mention the property at all, then they still both have ownership, because the judge did not award the property to one party or the other, nor was there a deed conveying title from one property owner to the other. So again, the only conclusion we can draw is that they are tenants in common.
Or another example would be maybe they have quite a bit of money and they own 4 or 5 pieces of real estate all over the country. And most of the real estate is mentioned in the decree, but not our subject property.
Right. That does happen.
We see that sometimes, like, oh, they mentioned the condo in Hawaii and
yes,
all these other homes, the home in Aspen, no mention of the home in Bellevue.
And that's all they say is the condo in Hawaii, the condo in Bellevue. It's like there's no property address. We can't make the assumption that it is the condo in Bellevue that is currently on the purchase and sale agreement and or on the 1003 because someone's refinancing. We cannot make that assumption. So automatically we have to vest as tenants in common. And again, that can make someone very upset especially if they're like, no, I was awarded through the divorce. I was supposed to get the condo in Bellevue that I'm currently selling or refinancing. And unfortunately, if the language isn't clear and it doesn't reference an actual address and or legal description, at least even an abbreviated legal description would be great, right? Then, you just have to be specific. There's no room for,
making assumptions.
Yes.
I think that's what I learned early in examining. It's like, no, I know this is what these people intended. It's obvious.
Right.
And as an examiner, you're kind of a people pleaser. You're kind of like, no, they're going to get upset with me if I muck up this report. But sometimes you don't have any choice.
Yeah. I have 2 more questions. So one is, based on what you're sharing with me, how many times do you think, or percentage or likelihood, that people have to go back to their attorneys to make changes based on what you're sharing today?
It really depends on how long they've been divorced. I will tell you, people don't want to do that because they don't want to reopen up that can of worms. They don't want to pay attorney fees, that type of thing. So if we can find Reid and Reid is willing to sign a quitclaim deed, great. Then we will resolve it. Even though what Reid said earlier is correct, we end up being the bad guy. It's not that the language was, vague in the decree. It's that Ticor Title is, asking for something that's, ridiculous.
We're being way too conservative.
Yes.
We're being sticklers.
Yes.
Right.
And so, but if Reid refuses or says, I'm not giving you a deed, we've been divorced for 15 years, figure it out. Or Reid says, I was not paid my money and I want to be paid, even if he was paid that 15 years ago or 10 years ago, then I have no choice. If we can't come to an agreement, I have to go back to the attorney and I have to have him take care of it. So I would say that maybe happens 10 to 20% of the time. It's not often.
Maybe less, yeah.
Because again, it's like if I have to tell Reid, it's like, Reid, I'm going to go to my attorney. And if you make me go to my attorney, you were paid, I'm going to ask that you pay my attorney fees, so, but then that, there's a reason people get divorced. So
I like making Susan's life miserable. Anything I can do to make her life harder.
Yes. He's still upset that I divorced him, and
yes,
he's going to make me pay.
That's right.
That's a lot of that going on. Anything I can do to make them unhappy.
Yes.
So do you have any memorable title files around divorce or issues that you can think of, and just like a file or something that really stood out in a case that you came upon in your years that you'd be willing to talk about, or if you can think of one?
I mean, to be honest with you, when these things come up, it is as painful for us as it is for the parties, because everyone wants to tell you their life story. Let me tell you why he is a terrible person. He's this or that or the other thing. So honestly, you could be on the phone with a client for hours listening to them tell their story of woe.
Escrow officer and therapist.
Yeah. One doesn't stand out because from our perspective, anytime that happens, we want to get through it as quickly as possible, and then we never want to think about it again. Mm-hmm. But the things that we're talking with you about, Cindy, these things come up all the time. And so if there's not a memorable one that stands out,
weird things like that are shocking is that you thought somebody was dead and then they came back to life, or they were divorced 30 years ago, but they kissed and made up and they got married again. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, this is not, you're not following reality here. This couldn't be happening. And then you realize, well, here's the explanation. Because some of this stuff, most of it happens off record. These are people's lives. Some people go through even sex changes, right? You might have a sex change or all kinds of things, just terrible tragedies, love, death. Like I said, some folks divorce and then 5 years later they get married again. But you don't see that on the chain of title. Yeah. You don't necessarily see it.
I will tell you one thing that Reid and I had within the last year is we were doing a closing. A lady was selling a house and she was an elderly lady, and clients are always upset. We're, again, being way too conservative. This lady had probably divorced her husband at least 15 years prior. And there was a judgment through the divorce. And we weren't actually dealing with her, we were dealing with her daughter. And so we said, okay, well, according to the decree, Fred was supposed to get paid, and it was a large sum. I want to say it was like $75,000 or more. Wow. And the daughter was like, we don't even know where Fred is. There's no way she would have paid him long ago. So anytime that happens, Reid and I always have to be like, it's a risk. We're an insurance company. Are we willing to take the risk and insure through this? Or are we going to require that she find Fred, and Fred needs to confirm with us he's been paid? So in this particular instance, Reid and I were mulling it over. We do have ways that we can try and track down people. We can look to see what their addresses, contact information. And so part of our standard process is we did reach out to Fred. We tried to reach him, left him a voicemail, said, hey, can you please give us a call? The daughter was very, very insistent and very angry with us that were not willing to go forward without it. It was just too big of a risk. And, a couple days before the transaction was supposed to close, lo and behold, Fred called us back and he said, no, I haven't been paid. And that was the truth. He really had not been paid. 15 years later. My question is, who's going to go 15 years and not get paid? That was a rarity. Yeah. That's why it stands out for me, because honestly, more often than not, what happens is Fred was paid 15 years ago, but no one made him sign off on the fact that he was paid. And so now Fred is trying to get paid again.
It's a really good example.
Yeah, it is a good example. Well, I'm really grateful to you both for taking the time today to share this really valuable information. I mean, obviously, you're both very busy, and I just want to say thank you, because this has been a topic, the whole title part of divorce, that, I don't know, and there's lots of questions that come up on my end of things. And so it's wonderful to have two professionals, obviously, that have been in the business so long, that really know their stuff. And just, do you have a final thought or something that you would want to say to attorneys or divorcing clients, like just some final thought that either of you or both of you may have for today's call?
To all my attorney friends, please put the legal description
of the house that's supposed to be conveyed.
Of the subject property. Please include the legal description. For a long time, we had underwriters memos saying you cannot close unless the legal description is in the decree. Okay. But then occasionally we would make a business decision and okay, the address is there, the tax parcel's there, because people would get angry, Ticor's being way too conservative. But really, and I think that's the thing, is divorce attorneys, they're not real estate attorneys. It's a different area.
Yeah.
But, and it is, because sometimes the property has a vacant lot next door. Or or it'll just refer to the family home.
Yeah, my final parting thought is, look, anything that has to happen after the decree has been finalized, follow through and make sure, when those things happen, make sure that it's clear that those things have happened, because that's where people really get into trouble. It's those types of things where, something is in the decree, but it's open-ended and nothing happens when the event occurs. Nothing happens to show that event has occurred. And that is probably the most problematic thing that we run into. So
it's also emotions were very high at the time. Yeah. This big sense of urgency. And then 3 years later, no follow-up.
Yeah. No follow-up. Interesting. Yeah. And my hunch is that when divorces are final, everybody kind of moves on and they don't think about going back. Well, did this get done? Did that get done? Do we have record of it? That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, again, thank you both so very much for today. I just super appreciate your time and like I said, your expertise. And I'm really glad that we met, because I have a feeling I'm going to have more questions to come in the future around this. And
anytime, Cindy.
Really happy working with you guys. It's been really wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us on Divorce Mortgage Strategies, powered by the Divorce Lending Association. If today's conversation brought you clarity, insight, or inspiration, we encourage you to subscribe and share this episode with others in your circle. For more resources, or to connect with a certified divorce lending professional in your area, visit divorcelendingassociation.com. And be sure to download the free Divorce Strategy Hub mobile app for tools, education, and support designed to guide you through the financial side of divorce. Until next time, remember, in divorce, the mortgage isn't the problem, it's the plan.